Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Daily Mushroom Podcast. I'm going to be sharing some deeply personal experiences on this one, and because of that, I got to get a little disclaimer out of the way here. So here we go. This podcast represents the opinions and individual experiences of myself and my guests on the show. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. The content here is for informational purposes only, and because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions related to psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. Okay, now that that's out of the way, this is the story of my heroic dose of psilocybin and the work that was put in leading up to the day of the session. So I did about 2 months of counseling with my guide and a bunch of different preparation exercises before the day itself. And the amazing part of this podcast is my guest is my guide. So you're going to get perspective from both of us on how this whole thing shook out. And the reason why I wanted to share this deeply personal experience is to inspire people not just to do psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, but just to talk about their grief and their guilt and their trauma and shame and all this shit that we all carry around with us. I just want to open up that conversation and lead with some vulnerability here. And I do share some very deeply vulnerable parts of my life in this podcast. So I hope we can all get to a place where we can talk about it and learn to come to terms with it and help one another let that shit go. So without any further delay, here is the story of one of the craziest days I'll probably ever experience in my life. Thanks for listening, guys.
Here we go.
Right on.
Man, here we are. Adrian.
Brett, thanks for having me, dude.
Yeah, man, this is going to be a very different conversation than most. And the reason for us doing this is to talk about a recent experience that you and I both had that was focused around a psilocybin therapy session for myself, and you were my guide for that.
Mm-hmm, it's true.
Yeah, that's what we did.
Ah.
And it was, I don't know what the word is for it, but it was kind of everything all wrapped into one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And the cool thing is we're actually in the place, like we did it right here, you know, on the floor, 2 feet away from where we're recording this podcast in this little, this tiny space that I call my home as well. So that's, there's good vibes here.
Yeah,
And
it
I
still
love
feels
that.
very alive in here.
Yeah.
I feel very connected to it being back here for the first time.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. This is the first return since we did it, and it's very fresh. It was 9 days ago. So still very fresh in my mind as well. But before we get into that whole experience, I want to learn about Adrian Oberg, the human, and how you got into this work. And I just want to say that I've spoken with other people about your work.
Oh, yeah.
That's how we met. And one thing that everybody told me was like, Adrian's tapped into something a little bit different. He's got a skill, he's got a gift, and I can 100% confirm that is true.
Wow.
So it was cool to feel that. It was cool to go through this process with you. Trust is such a huge thing when you're doing a psychedelic therapy experience.
Absolutely.
And yeah, to just like work with you for, a couple months and do our counseling sessions and have that trust, it was crazy.
Oh,
You know?
man. It means so much to me to hear all of that like
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you. And to know that people are saying that, yeah, I'm really touched and just so so overjoyed and honored to be doing something that is so fulfilling and feels really like in line with my values. Yeah.
Just who you're doing exactly what you should be doing is what it feels like to me.
It really feels that way. Yeah.
That's cool.
And the encouragement and support coming from people like you. Yeah, really. We've got a good thing going here.
No doubt. Yeah. So Adrian, the human, this is always an interesting thing to dig into for myself to hear and for our listeners to hear. How did this, where did this all start? How did you get into this, let's call it a line of work?
I never really intended to. I never really thought that it was a line of work at all.
Right.
And when I was in high school, I would come across mushrooms and dream up studies and things like that. I'm like, wouldn't it be cool to have someone in an fMRI machine or something like that, and to see what's actually going on in the brain, while they're using psilocybin. But I thought it was just a pipe dream. I wasn't aware of any of the research that dated back, as far as the 50s. I wasn't aware of traditional use, none of that. And I was just having my own experiences and sharing them with my friends.
Right.
But
So what age was this?
it was like 15, 16, I think
Okay.
would have been the first time that the mushrooms came around. And
Yeah. And just for, I guess, like like your mid 30s right now?
yeah,
Okay, so
33 now. So
Right.
it's been a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, I
Couple
feel-
decades.
Yeah, I feel so at this point so lucky to have had the opportunity to encounter mushrooms back then. I was, it wasn't really, it was still kind of a verboten thing. My mom would be, you shouldn't be doing that. It's going to
Right.
change your brain chemistry, sort of thing.
Right.
And I was already, I was kind of like, well, I think that's the point. This is what we're going for here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So early on, it was just generally like an unfolding of a lot of the societal conditioning, just seeing through a lot of the practices, attitudes, behaviors in the people around me. It kind of dominated the culture in the small town that I grew up in. And
where was that?
I was in Dryden, Northwest Ontario.
I drove through there real quick on my way through.
Oh, yeah.
Across Canada.
It's hard not to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
kind of have to.
Yeah.
Right on
easy to
right on the
miss.
Highway 1 there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Trans Canada.
Yeah. So didn't really have mentors, didn't really have other people to to process anything with, but I had a few, like maybe some art, like a few books that I would come across.
Right.
But it was really, it was renegade stuff like Hunter Thompson, Merry Pranksters, very like fast and loose, psychedelic. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and like sort of pick up things from the different bands that I was into, all these little hints, following all these
Right.
crumbs, but not even knowing what I was following, not knowing who to talk to about it. Yeah, really kind of feeling on my own with my friends, but even then feeling like the mushrooms were impacting me differently than
Right.
they. I felt like I was going deep into something that I didn't even have I hadn't developed a part of my psyche that even knew how to talk about it.
Right.
It
Well,
was
the
just happening.
fact that something really fascinating that you just said is that when your mom was telling you, like, it's going to change your brain chemistry, and you're like, well, that's the point.
Uh-huh.
To know that from a young age, that, like, to me, that means that you were either on a different wavelength from a young age, or you were getting some sort of intelligence through the mushrooms, right? That was telling you, like, no, this is, like, follow this process, right? Because it's very true that I remember, I've talked about this many times before on the podcast, but the that weird rumor that there was like brain damage every time that you would take mushrooms, and it would leave like a pinhole in your brain that was not repairable. And I remember being like, I'm staying away from those things.
Yeah,
And I,
yeah.
like, from my teenage years, I didn't start experimenting until my mid 20s. But that was in there. And the first time I took mushrooms, there was that, like, in my palm of my hand, like the fear of bringing it to my mouth of like, is this going to ruin my life?
Yeah.
Or am I going to have an amazing experience?
Oh yeah.
So that's something that still needs to be really unwound in our like Western culture here, right?
Yeah, all the miseducation has been such a disservice, like that it feeds that fear into these experiences, and I think it seeds a lot of the more difficult aspects of experiences, just because mushrooms are poison, your brain is going to be bleeding, things like that. I still hear people say, like, oh, like really, like, sort of innocently, they're like, oh, you work with mushrooms, aren't those really bad for people? How many times can people do that?
Right.
And it's
Before you completely melt your brain.
Yeah.
And it's over.
yeah. And I guess all of that comes from from some very real risks that are more psychological risks to do with sort of like unsupported or unprepared use, but the way that they've gathered, sort of snowballed in the public consciousness, just to be these scary scary substances, and people don't even really know exactly what they're afraid of, but they've been successfully kind
it's
of
it's a
cast in that
powerful
light.
propaganda machine that has gotten deep into our subconscious, right?
Yeah, there's
It was successful.
a lot
Let's
of
just
momentum
yeah.
behind that. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, so kind of from that teenage age, started experimenting, and then I believe you started out working in you were doing like festivals and helping with harm reduction, right?
Yeah.
Is that kind of when you first started getting your first experience of like working with others in
Yeah.
psychedelic experiences?
Yeah, like often it would happen that my friends around me would have, experiences, or I'd be at a party when I was younger, and someone would be, having some sort of transcendental experience, but not really knowing how to let it in.
Right.
So I would find myself really curious and also just caring. I wanted to help them,
Mm.
and when I started working at festivals, I realized that I had been cultivating this skill. I had been spending a lot of time with people in distress, and sort of learning what it takes to help them ground, help them center, and
Hmm.
help them open up to the experience, and receive whatever it might have to give them, and accept whatever that might be.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, it turned out that once I started working at festivals, I worked at Shambhala for the very first time. It's like, as you
Yeah.
probably know, it's a big music festival in
Yeah.
the Rockies,
Yep.
and yeah, thousands of people, and a lot of people showing up in the sanctuaries, or the harm reduction area, where yeah, they're in all sorts of states, all manner
Right.
of the human experience.
Yeah.
It all shows up there, and yeah, working from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., getting off shift and feeling so energized because I'd actually
Wow.
like found something that I felt like I was adept at. I felt like I
Right.
had an aptitude there, and I don't think that was the first time I'd really felt that at all.
Yeah.
I'd been kind of on this path, but it never seemed like a legitimate path. So I was really wondering why all the people around me had found something they could really sink their teeth into, and I
Mm.
hadn't. But it turns out, I had been. I just,
Yeah.
yeah,
Do you
really
think people around you had it figured out and had that thing?
I would see my friends who were, they're like, oh yeah, like I'm a bike mechanic, or like, I love
Yeah. They're
snowboarding, or
slapping
like I'm a
labels. Yeah.
musician
Right.
and I've been playing music forever, and this is what I do, and I know this is what I'm gonna do
Yeah.
forever, whether it's what's making them money or not, I don't know,
Right.
but just like
They had a
something.
passion. Yeah.
Yeah,
Something that was like a deep conviction that fired them up.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I didn't feel able to like embrace this passion. It was still sort of, this deviant thing, and it
Yeah.
wasn't. Yeah, it was. Yeah, there was a lot of years of like grappling with that.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. And you
yeah,
found it through helping people navigate their psychedelic experiences
yeah.
in a very intense environment. Like, I've never taken psychedelics at a festival.
Right,
I can't imagine doing it, to be
right.
honest. After
Yeah.
doing them, around a campfire with some friends and then in a more like therapeutic setting,
Hmm.
it's the amount of emotion that comes through and visual distortions and disassociation from the self. If there's a bunch of people and music, like it's so overstimulating,
Yeah.
and you're already like your stimulus is through the roof the second that you take them, and then there's all this external. I just yeah, I don't know, that'd be very challenging for me. So I understand, these, I like how you call them the sanctuaries too. And
Hmm.
how busy and crazy did those sanctuaries get, like the harm reduction tents or
Hmm.
areas?
Yeah, yeah. Like the festival is, almost a week long, and over the Friday, Saturday, those would be the most, the busiest nights, and we would usually have about 50 beds set up in that area,
Yeah.
and for the majority of those nights, like from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. they're pretty much full.
Right.
There's often this peculiar, yeah, sort of a way of it where they'll be full, and then someone will show up and really need a bed, and at that exact moment someone will be like, oh yeah, I think I'm good to go, and they'll leave. And it
Whoa.
was really uncanny how things circulate, and how everyone
Huh.
always seemed to get just what they needed.
Right. Back
Yeah.
on their feet and know that maybe they were doing a little bit more okay than the other person that needed help. Like still
Mm.
have that awareness, right? To see
Mm-hmm.
someone come in and be like, well, I'm not in that state anymore.
Uh-huh.
So let's get this person the help, especially when you just received that help too, right?
Yeah.
Like that you have that feeling of like gratitude that, oh, someone was here for me and got me through this really challenging experience that I was just trapped in for a little bit.
Definitely. Yeah. Sometimes even those people, once they come around, then then they become, really good supports for the person in the bed next to them, because they
Yeah.
can just sort of they're feeling that, they're feeling so acutely that it's gonna be okay, because they just made it through, and they're like, okay, it is okay. And then they can assure the person next to them, they're like, I know it seems scary right now, but yeah, I just came out the other end.
Right,
And
right.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's an amazing thing to hear too, right? Because yeah, if there's just someone that's there with you that's not tripping as well, it's hard to maybe connect or empathize with them. But when someone looks you in the eye and you can see their pupils are dilated and they're like, "You're gonna be okay," that's a nice feeling, right? It's very reassuring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of feel like you're on the same team.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Cool. So, how long did you do that for? Like that,
Mm.
and was that volunteer work?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you would get a ticket in exchange. In fact, I would usually do
Right.
2 of those shifts and get 2 tickets, so it'd be nice to
Hmm.
bring a friend along. It's a really good, yeah, it's a good arrangement over there.
Yeah,
I've
no
worked
doubt.
there every year that it's happened since then, but yeah, these last couple of years have been shut down. And in 2017, um, yeah, some friends and I started a harm reduction crew of our own,
Yeah.
called the Celium, and we just took it around to smaller festivals around BC. And yeah, it was really like, yeah, setting up a big tent and safe space, and sending people out there just to make it known that we're out there and that we're there to help people. and
Yeah.
and just getting kind of like getting into the scene, so that you aren't this kind of like auxiliary organization that's
Right.
coming in to serve this purpose, but rather like you are part of what's going
Yeah,
on, and
exactly.
you just have that kind of that awareness about you, that you're keeping your eyes open, and talking to people about what you're doing there, and people are excited, and then word really gets out. It feels eventually like the whole festival is kind of like these extensions of your
Right.
harm reduction team, so that when something goes down, everyone knows where to send a person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Or they can see you've already kind of met and connected with everyone. So
Mm.
everyone's little pod or group knows like if something starts going down with one of their people,
Yeah.
they can spot and be like, "Oh yeah, I just spoke with Adrian. Look
Yeah.
at he's right over there. Like bring this person over and be like, help."
Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah.
feels really important to be
Yeah.
to be part of the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was anybody like in the harm reduction crew? Were you using psychedelics at all, like during the festivals?
No, no, it was a pretty hard rule to, like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Be sober.
stay sober.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, yeah. There was one instance where I was off duty,
Mm,
and responded to a call, and felt like I was a little bit out of my depth, and be like, okay, this is
right.
when I need to like back off my own ideas about myself in the role that I'm accustomed to playing, and recognize that I'm off duty. I should actually send them
Right.
to the people that are on duty.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Good call.
that was a good learning experience for me. A
Yeah.
really good one.
Instead of
Yeah.
just trying to take it on and maybe not having the capacity
Yeah, yeah.
to, yeah,
Yeah.
to hold space for that person in that
Mhm.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. And so, um, you had, what was the name of the cruise? Selenium?
The Celium.
Celium.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Cool, cool. And then when did it kind of get like move? This is always an interesting transition, I find, using psychedelics to enhance these, festival experiences
Mhm.
or recreational experiences, let's call them, and then like the therapy side,
Right.
because it's having its next big wave right now. It's one of the reasons why we started this podcast. Just like what's going on? Like there's this huge third wave of psychedelics rolling through,
Mhm.
and so when did that kind of shift from the harm reduction side into, oh, this is a very therapeutic thing and we could do it in a different setting, and I
Mhm.
want to help people with that.
Yeah, it sort of started up alongside it. Yeah,
Mm,
I'll continue doing harm reduction work, and then yeah, the therapy work is yeah, complementary, or just sort of yeah, it's a different field. It really feels like every opportunity in those harm reduction settings to try to help these sometimes distressing experiences turn into real, you know chances to grow and to heal.
mm,
It's like, okay, like I see that, if people have, if we've been able to develop that trust, and maybe if they know where they got their stuff, and they didn't just buy from
right.
someone random, if they've really done the preparation, if if they know what they're going, if they know what is possible. You know, a lot of the time people were really caught off guard by how powerful, how otherworldly their experiences could be. So
Mm,
to provide that kind of education and really help people create the space to open up to that kind of experience, I've come to recognize that yeah, that the potential is so great. But it was never as if I was like, oh, I'm gonna start offering people this in a therapeutic
mm.
modality. I just kind of got identified as the person
Right.
who could do that. There was a friend who would yeah, who was a real, yeah, a real kind of veteran on the scene, and he was looking for someone to hold space for him. He
Mm.
was in town and didn't wasn't, you know, connected to the community so much,
Yeah.
but
Is this the
had a
guy
ton of
that worked with
experience.
Stanislav Grof?
Uh-huh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, he had
cool.
experience with Groff back in the 80s, so
That's wild.
yeah, really yeah, a learned fellow for sure,
Yeah.
and experienced, and the yeah, he really helped me. You know, he kind of turned me on to Groff, so I really got to like read about some of the most yeah, the most intense, the most I don't know, real, like he kind of describes it a lot in like Jungian terms, like connecting to the collective unconscious, and
Mm.
the way, you know, that material can manifest. You know, started to, I guess, normalize the kind of things that I'd been seeing in
Right.
harm reduction settings. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, and make sense of it. And it's like it's not madness by any means. It's you know, that there's a kernel of like of absolute truth in there that's
Mm.
just maybe getting like blown up or exaggerated into some archetypal myth. But
Right.
that yeah, reading Groff sort of helped me understand what was going on in some of those situations, and it really helped me prepare for what could come up in the first session that I was to do.
Right.
So yeah, I was able to hold space
Yeah.
for my friend like that, and then he was able to also, yeah, hold space for me. So it was the first time that I had the opportunity
Mm.
to go into an experience with that same preparation, with that same like deep development of trust with the person, with the guide.
Yeah.
And that really took it to the next level, because I then understood, I was able to kind of go into, you know, experiences from 10 years previous that had been overwhelming and had not
Right.
been integrated, and I was able to kind of, you know, go back to that same general space and start making sense of it, because it wasn't as if it was happening in the middle of something else. It was like, here is all the space to like delve into this realm, and that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, turns out I was like, oh, okay, I have been here before.
Right.
That time that I spent 8 hours in the, you know, the back of a hatchback traveling through a blizzard, you know, and it wasn't really like, I didn't really remember what had happened that day,
Right. Right.
and where I was in my own psyche, or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
something somewhere beyond that. Yeah, I was able to go back and feel like I was supposed to be there, and that I was welcome there, and that I was able to start piecing things
Mm.
back together, and that really spoke to the immense benefit that could be offered
Right.
by limiting your input, limiting stimulation, and just knowing that that someone is there to take care of things, so I can really
Mm-hmm.
surrender to the experience. And that yeah, that kind of cinched it. That was like, okay, now I know what can be offered in the setting. And
Right.
eventually word got out, and people would say, hey, like, I want to take these mushrooms, but like, you know, I've maybe taken them a couple times before, but I'm a little bit concerned about what would happen if I take a lot. So would you come and just, you know,
Yeah.
hold space for me? And
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, if I knew them already, be like, yeah, okay, we'll just get together and lock down a couple details and make sure that we feel good together. But then people who I never knew, they would start,
Right.
you know, start approaching me. They would catch word. So then it was okay, like, how do we start? You know, where do we
Yeah.
start? You know, what do we need to do before I even say like yes? You know, how do I know that that we're that we're connected enough, that we're on the same page, that we can
Yeah.
really trust each other?
Going
So
from being complete strangers to within a few weeks or a couple months having this very like intimate is a great word because
absolutely.
it's like the amount of trust that needed between like you and I, just for me to like feel comfortable even thinking about doing this,
Yeah, yeah.
it needed to be very high. And I'm amazed that we got there so quickly. I'm a pretty trusting person, and you can see that you trust everyone, which is a beautiful, beautiful gift. But that trust, so trust and integration, seem to be two big things that where you can really tap into that with like the therapeutic experience
Yeah,
that maybe you're not getting in the recreational side, right?
definitely.
And like recreational psychedelics is great, and they have their place, but this is it's very different. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something about having that person there that you can trust that actually helps you, or like, yeah, it gives you all the opportunity to recognize what else, like what trust feels like, and then
Yeah.
you know the kind of like looking at other aspects of your life, maybe even yourself, like how well do you trust
Yeah.
yourself? How well do
Right.
you trust this life that you've created around you? And yeah, I think focusing in on that trust axis is yeah, really beneficial.
Man, that makes me. Yeah, that gets my brain going. How much you trust yourself to choose someone to be your guide, right? Like, because I have to trust myself, even though you were recommended to me by a friend who I really trust.
Right.
It was still like, I had to kind of go and spend some time with you and be like, do I trust myself enough to
Yeah.
go down this road and cross over into what you said before? I don't know what the word you use, but like another dimension. Like
Sure.
I was in a different place, so
Ah.
to be in that vulnerable space where that I'm going into the unknown and just knowing that I'm not by myself.
Yeah.
I did a session or two sessions last year kind of by myself. Just was reading about what they're doing at Johns Hopkins, and put on the playlist and threw a blindfold on and laid in my bed in my room with the door locked by myself.
Right.
And I didn't find those to be, for me personally, as powerful. It was like there was no accountability. There was no one there to just like, if something came up, I find I would just like take my blindfold off. I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm gonna get up. Like maybe I need to go to the washroom. And I just realized I was like distracting myself.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't really get into any sort of depth. I kind of just bounced around and felt scattered for about 4 or 5 hours. And there was benefits from it, but then I was also missing the integration side too. And one thing you shared with me that I think is really interesting is you had all of these experiences without the integration, and then you're feeling a little fractaled, kind of like 10 years after starting your journey with psychedelics, not being able to make sense or put some of these experiences back together to understand what they meant. And then being able to go back there is very cool, like transporting back 10 years and being like, oh, that's what I learned and that's where I was, and I'm back in this place. And now I'm listening, right? I'm here to actually learn instead of just kind of run around all ADD and be confused.
Yeah, I think it was important for my mental health. I think that what I had opened up in those experiences was somewhat repressed, and it needed to express, it had at its root very very like core longings, core values, the ways that I wanted to actualize in the world. But the way that it had shown up in my experiences was always, like this sort of sense of urgency, this sense of failure, woven in with like megalomania and delusions of persecution and all that kind of stuff. And I'd always make it through the night all right, but I didn't know what to do with all that had happened. I was like, this sounds like something that might be dangerous. This might be, but I knew that there was some wisdom in it, but I really needed to go in with with that intention. The intention to actually to open up to it, make all the space for it, and to just welcome whatever came, and discovered that there was a lot of intelligence in my subconscious that was just waiting to emerge and slap me in the face.
Yeah. And so what was kind of the unlock for you with the integration where you were starting to piece it back together? Like what was maybe an early process that you started to use that helped you organize these experiences into a way that was helpful for you?
It was very much like the conversational, the interpersonal dynamic, just having friends even outside of the experience, but just friends that I could really trust and talk to. A key part of this whole process was some friends and I we started a club at UVic, VAPS, the Victoria Association for Psychedelic Studies.
Mhm.
Yeah, you came to a couple things, didn't you?
No, I haven't been to anyone
Oh,
yet because
okay.
I started learning about it just before COVID.
All right, yeah.
And I've been just waiting to get back in.
Yeah.
And now there's waiting lists to get back in. It's awesome. It's great to see uh, these meetups starting back up and the demand from the community of people that want to connect and get together and learn from each other and talk about this.
Yeah.
But yeah, continue. And VAPS is I'm guessing a little spin-off from MAPS.
Yeah. We had Philippe Lucas had been I think he was the chairman of the board of Maps Canada, and
Oh,
he
man.
was working on his thesis at UVic, and he said, yeah, it's about time that UVic had a psychedelic club. So he got myself and my good friend Danny Motika, who's now he's the CEO at Cygen.
Yeah.
And then
And they're working with DMT over there, is that right?
yeah, they're a lab, right? So yeah, they're sanctioned to make a lot of different psychedelics.
So cool.
And
That's awesome.
just providing them to like approved buyers. I imagine that'll be like clinical trials
Right.
and
Yep.
other things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really exciting. Really, VAPS was the genesis of a lot of really cool projects. And for me, I saw the value in it as being like, oh, like this is a way to meet people. And I think it was just I didn't even really know at the time how badly I needed to share my experiences and to learn from others about theirs, because again, I hadn't come from a place where there was a culture around discussing this.
Right.
It really just didn't exist. I had the friends that I would trip with, but we had no education, no mentorship, and in some ways, I think that benefited us. We had to figure it out, put together our own concepts and theories and test them. But it was really it was just incredible to meet so many people. Every couple weeks, bringing out a variety of people from the woodwork, and that they all had different different angles, different perspectives. They'd all learned from different people, read and listened to different people, and had could share like the words that they'd use to capture some of these experiences. And some of them would stick and some of them would slip off, but eventually I found that I was able to kind of, it was sort of this fight against the ineffable.
Right.
I do find that there's some aspect of psychedelics that you can't really ever explain to a person, but the closer language can get to triangulating that kind of experience, it really that really helped me to put it together. But in retrospect, I recognize it was that community, and just not being alone in figuring it out, and knowing that a lot of other people are just as taken by the multitudinous complexity of all of this work. And that
absolutely.
it was just so exciting to find people to really dig into that with.
Yeah, and the community aspect is, in my mind, everything. Like when we talk about trust and vulnerability, it took me a while. Like I had been experimenting with psilocybin mushrooms probably since I did my first one in like 2011. It wasn't a great experience. It's kind of a negative. I had a bit of a bad trip, but it was interesting. I just kind of stayed away from a bit, and then when I got out here to Victoria in 2015, it was like everyone was microdosing, and there was that like trust in the community. I was like, oh, okay, well, this seems pretty common and normal. And then I needed to have a lot of conversations with people that had done therapeutic experiences. It's like I was pre-interviewing everyone for my own experience.
Cool.
So I probably talked to 5 or 6 different people just to sit down, grab a drink or a coffee, and just be like, so what was it like? And it was it was that process that normalized it for me, right? Then I was like, okay, all this stigma that I've heard from, my parents' generation and the media, um, I'm listening to people that I really trust right now, that I'm close friends with, that we've been vulnerable and open with each other on a deeper level, and they're telling me everything's fine and it's good, and here's some things that you should maybe watch out for. So getting that like risk assessment from really trusting friends and that community, it was amazing. And then I just can kind of deeper and deeper, would do a little bit more and a little bit more, feel the fear and like have the fear kind of wash over me and come to the other side and be like, oh, that wasn't that scary. So I think, an important thing is, just like people taking their time with this stuff too, right? Yeah. And like that's what's beautiful. But something like VAPS is, if someone's never done psychedelics before, they can come to one of these meetups and listen to people who are very experienced, who aren't crazy. They're a very sound mind. They hold prominent positions as like a psychiatrist or a lawyer or something. So you start to see these weird things where you're like, whoa, these are like functioning members of society. And I remember thinking before, I'm like, people who like do a lot of psychedelics are just burnouts. And like, that was me 10, 15 years ago as I was growing up. This was told, right?
Sure.
And then you're like, oh, whoa, like, some very high level intelligent people here that are like, have said this has kind of made them who they are. And then you're like, wow, that's crazy that this was a part of your, building up of your like personality and what made you this person. And that totally shifts the whole thing. So the community aspect and just having these open conversations is amazing. It's to me, it's one of the most powerful parts of psychedelics, and just brings you together. Everybody wants to connect. Right. So
absolutely. Yeah. I'm so grateful for that initial group of people that was willing to take the initiative and get VAPS going, because it's definitely been the breeding ground for a lot of cool projects.
Yeah, and it's why we know each other.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Like it all kind of comes back to that root structure there. So let's talk about our journey together.
Yeah.
Because this is, I can easily say that, there's major points in life where an event happens, and this is only 9 days ago, so I don't feel like I'm jumping the gun by saying this, but this like experience with you and the day that we took the medicine and sat with it, that's a life-changing day for me. And I'm like, that's like Brett before, Brett after kind of thing, which is a cool thing to feel and know that deeper truth of that. So, we were referred to by a mutual friend. I called you up and you said, yeah, let's get together and, we'll do a counseling session or just kind of see if we're a good fit for each other. So that first kind of meeting, that's when you're feeling people out to be. So tell me a little bit about your process from that in our experience, and kind of like what you felt, how safe you need to feel with someone to engage in those next steps.
Yeah. It's structured to some extent. There are a few boxes I want to tick.
Yeah.
Just kind of like gauge your experience, with psychedelics, but also just your experience being with yourself, opening up to emotion, things like that, like how whether or not you've just kind of like get to know you and understand, where along your journey you are, and that not as if there's one specific place that makes you, suitable to take psychedelics, but just kind of get an idea of what kind of preparation we're going to do, what kind of, recognize like, how you describe, your engagement with your emotional material and with your past. And, if you've started doing the work of like connecting, your reactions to your history and your experience. I think that like if you hadn't already, done so much work in your life, when I encounter potential clients who haven't, it's like I'm hesitant to set a date right off the bat. I'm like, okay, we need to
we got some work to do.
Yeah. There seems to be a central understanding of like opening up to experiencing, open up to emotion, to your own emotion, that one needs to be willing. It doesn't mean that it seems like it'll be easy or that it won't be scary, but I really want to like cultivate that awareness in people that is where the juice is for sure, is
Right.
when we can let those emotions come through. So
Mm.
yeah, I think it's that's mostly the point, and that if we can kind of get there, and if we're accessing that kind of, that sort of a discussion, then it seems as if we're getting each other.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
able
Yeah.
to like open up to that. And if I'm yeah, I felt the yeah, I was enthralled with what you were telling me about your life story, and
Mm.
just really like, yeah, interested in you and in your process. and
Yeah.
and that's when like that actual like, yeah, the care and the willingness to like be there for you just arises in me. It, comes as a result
Right.
of that meeting. I'm like, this is a good
Feels
feeling.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that feeling of, we're ready.
Mhm.
Yeah, like I feel that connection. And yeah, so just for timeline stuff, we did the therapeutic experience on November 19th.
Mhm.
That'll just be a day that I remember for the rest of my life. That
Yeah.
date is going to be ingrained in my mind. And we I think we started talking kind of mid September, and I was not in a great place when I came to see you. I'm having a lot of challenges with my relationship, my relationship with my partner, and having some trouble with work. And
Mhm.
I just felt like I was very scattered, and kind of, a lot of old stuff was coming up for me that I was
Mhm.
like, oh, I never really dealt with this properly.
Yeah.
And I remember you were like, oh, let's, how does like, late November sound? And I remember feeling like, no, I need to do this now
Ah,
because like
aha.
I'm not good now. Like
Sure.
I need you to help me. And I'm really glad. I like the process of you kind of dialing it back, because I thought like, we talk once and then like a week later I would
Mhm.
do it and I'd be better in a week after that, right?
Uh-huh.
Because I could realize that like I was grasping for a bit of a fix. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to get this feeling out of my stomach because
Uh-huh.
it's not good right now.
Fair.
And so that was good. And so then the next step for us was to have a couple more counseling sessions. And those sessions were great because it was talk therapy,
Mhm.
right? Like, I'm kind of working through my stuff, but really what we were doing is setting the intention of, why am I doing this,
Yeah.
right? And that was cool to go through that process, and we drilled that down. And this is a very, very like personal thing that I've been working on for a lot of
Mhm.
years. So in April of 2012, my mom passed away from a very aggressive cancer that, when they discovered it in December of 2011,
Mhm.
it was already stage 4
Yeah.
metastasized. So the doctors were kind of like, you don't have much time. And
Mhm.
so kind of went from our little family unit of 4, like myself, my sister, my mom and dad, feeling like everybody was healthy and happy. My dad and my mom had started their retirement, and everything seemed good. They had built their dream home up on a lake, and they had just moved into it. And the floors weren't even in. I think they were
Mhm.
getting done in January, and in December it was just like snatched away. So that's something that I've talked to a lot of people about and
Mhm.
worked on, and I feel like I've gotten close, but there's always been this tension and stress, and so that's the tension that we kind of started setting, right?
Yeah.
And we went through that process, and you kind of helped guide me along and structure that container.
Mhm.
And probably the most beautiful part of this whole thing that we did in the intention preparation was the drawing that you asked me to do. So
Good.
talk about that and why that's important to you, and then I can kind of flip back and tell people kind of what I drew and where that came from.
Sure. Yeah, I've been learning a lot about drawing, and just how it seems to be, a really like direct line to the subconscious. We
Right.
can start interpreting all these feelings that we have and making sense of them, but when we actually try to put them down on paper, it just comes through. The imagery is representative.
Mm.
And yeah, I learned a lot about that from Bruce Tobin. He's
Yeah.
yeah, kind of a legendary art therapist around here. And
Yeah.
yeah, he's really tuned me into how helpful it can be to just give people these drawing assignments, and that it's the expressive nature, it's the just spending time with the thought, with a feeling,
Mm.
and getting it on paper, and not not going too cerebral about it. And
That's
yeah,
huge.
and it, all of those things were said to me at first, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. And I started, gradually like asking people like, hey, would you be into, maybe creating an image that represents some aspect of what you're working with, or some dynamic between you and another person, in your case, it was, the relationship between the point, the goal, what we were trying to access through the experience, what felt like it would be, potentially in the way, currently what are the obstacles to you accessing what you're looking for, and then what is out there that helps support you.
Yeah.
What are your resources, your allies, all of those aspects, and that, I want you to think about that anyway,
Right.
but to give you the opportunity to draw it really helps you be with those thoughts in a more embodied way. I think just by way of the expressive nature of creating, creating images. I shy away from calling it art because it gives people, it makes people feel like they need to be producing something that has
It's like
objective
a masterpiece
value
as well,
or
right?
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I felt, because I'm like, oh man, I don't draw.
Yeah.
Like I like to write, which is why there was a lot of words in my drawing. But that was a bit of an intimidating thing, right? It's like, how do I draw someone's face? And I was like, oh man, I was getting a little bit too like overthinking it. But
Sure.
yeah, it was great. So I remember sitting down to do the drawing, and I kind of took like an entire day. I was settling in. It was a very rainy day on a Sunday, and I kind of cleaned my space and just had this nice day to myself. Did some meditating and started the drawing. And for whatever reason, it was important for me to draw a tree, and in the center of that tree was the central intention, which I just wrote "Mom." And that was is like, okay, this is where I want to go. I don't know exactly yet why. Like I had a little bit of an idea, and we'll get to that in a little bit later as we move closer to the experience. So I wrote "Mom," and then I kind of wrote around within the tree. So I've got the tree, and I got my mom in the center, and then around that, kind of like intentions of who I want to be, right? Like just present, focused, compassionate, and that was the central kind of theme of what I was going for. And then on the outer like branches and just outside the leaves of the tree were all the things that I felt were big stressors in my life that might hold me back from being that center truth and being connected to that purpose.
Right.
So business stress, financial stress, kind of like worrying about my health and fitness too much, like taking that too seriously to the point where you might be doing some damage or not enjoying some certain things. Like we talked about afterwards, I was like, oh man, I just want to gorge. I just want to like eat really good rich foods, and you were like, yeah man, go get that rich butter and like have a good time, right? So it's like not feeling guilty about that stuff. And then the way I drew it too was the container, like the root structure of the trees kind of dropped down and then created this like full circle loop where it looped all the way up above the tree and came all the way around. And within that root structure, I had all the important practices and people in my life that I know I can lean on or really dig into. You spoke earlier about your friends and their passions and like how important that is to have something that you're just like, can really lose yourself in and get into that flow state. So that was a part of that whole structure there. And I remember doing the drawing and just like looking at it, and it was cool, like just to see like, wow, this is this really beautiful little place that I get to now go and explore, and still not knowing like what was going to happen in the experience. And then we got together another time and we talked about it. So do you remember anything from that conversation about like right before we did the day? Like it was probably, I think it was only like 2 days. Like
2 days before, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is that something intentional? Like you want to meet with someone very like fairly close within kind of 48 hours for the experience?
I like doing that. Yeah, it's always whether or not scheduling works out that way, but yeah, it does seem like it sort of extends that that sacred space. That if there's not going to be a whole lot happening between the time that we meet and then the time that we do the session, there's we can kind of really like speak to that in between time and make sure that we're kind of on the same page about what you're going to be doing between now and then.
Yeah.
And I think that doing it within a couple days means that there's less of a chance that other big life happenings are going to come in and,
Totally.
and take you down a different path.
Yeah.
So it really it does offer a benefit just to kind of create or expand that container to include maybe the couple days beforehand. Yeah. Why do you think you chose a tree?
So this is kind of funny. I had Shannon Dames on the podcast
Right, cool.
last week. We haven't released the episode yet, but that'll be coming out. And just for anybody listening, she is a professor of nursing at Vancouver Island University, has this Roots to Thrive organization. And I looked up the organization probably a week before the experience. And I don't know if I saw this on their website or if I saw it after. It was a very strange thing, but she actually has that tree on her website with the root structure going down and like words in it, and then clouds on the outside, which are things. So I was like, did I see this, or is this one of those weird connection things? So
Funny.
I'm not sure. And I think but I don't remember seeing it, so we'll just go with that.
Yeah, sure.
And that was kind of trippy to talk to Shannon and be like, I just had this experience in the drawings on your website. I don't know if this happened before, like chicken and the egg, but for whatever reason, I just think like, I don't know, like there's something about being in nature for me where I just feel more grounded, and I feel like staring at a tree when you're really present and just, you're not thinking about the future or the past. It's just a beautiful experience. And being out here in the old growth forests that are all over Vancouver Island, you really feel something, right? Like you feel like a deeper connection to that there's something else going on that you don't understand. And that's kind of where I felt like I was going. I was like, I don't really know what's going to happen. I don't fully understand this medicine or this process yet, but it's got something to teach me, and I just need to trust that. So that was the tree, and the root structure kind of completing that perfect circle, because we talked about a container, right? And I just liked how it was all one.
Yeah.
It was all the same thing. And I've had other psilocybin experiences where kind of got to peek behind the curtain of like this different feeling of connectedness and merging entities, right? Where like everything was kind of blurring into one, and my mother was my sister, was my grandmother, was my dad, and it's like very hard to distinguish them.
Yeah.
But I knew that they were all there together, and so that whole kind of root structure system, I just it's very representative of family, community, and so that was where I went with that. And it just kind of came out like, again, I'm not really sure. I just started drawing, just sketching, and I think I threw a couple sketches away because I just didn't really know. And then I was like, oh, I need to draw a tree. And then I just went from there. And I think on my third iteration, the tree came out, and off it went. Yeah.
It was really powerful. And just, to see the way that you'd found to organize it all in, sort of a self-contained, interrelated thing that didn't, it wasn't like, it didn't seem as if it was looking to exile all those like the more difficult, more the aspects that were sort of obstructions or kind of in the way, but really like that they were all part of the system and just sort of ways of working with them.
Yeah, it's and I'm such a big believer in that. Like, if I have financial stress in my life, like, financial independence is very important to me, but there's a stress that comes along with that. And being a business owner is very important to me, and caring for my employees is very important to me, but there's a stress that comes with that. So I've had a lot of tendencies in my life that I want to run away from some of these things and just like, not ever have to deal with money again, or not ever have to like run payroll for anyone again, and just figure it out for yourself. I'm just going to look after me. But I know that like that doesn't lead me to a very fulfilling place in life. Right. So I wanted to put them kind of, not in like a scary imagery, like they were bad. It was like, I need to get a little bit more in touch of why I feel stress around these things that I know are important, to manage it properly, and to reframe the perspective around those things, just so they can be a little bit more of a flow in my life as opposed to like a point of resistance.
Cool.
Yeah. So that was a big part too. And yeah, I feel like I definitely got there. I felt a lot better at work and with everything in the last 9 days here. So
Yeah.
it's worked. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really want to like speak to the way that that you really did make that space. You really did bring yourself to this purpose. You know, I could really appreciate how much time you made to work with this, you know, before the session, you know, to really make the space, and that you set time aside afterwards just to be with it, and you know, turned off your phone, all of that, you know, and your meditation practice, all of that I really, you know, I remember there was a moment where, you know, where we were talking about whether, you know, kind of like, yeah, you know, I don't want to like, whoa, how did you put it? Maybe it was like, you know, something about like doing it right or something.
Yeah. Like there's no right way to do psychedelic. It's a very egoic thing, right? To say, this, like it's just a very control thing to say, I need to do this process perfectly and it needs to go this way.
Right.
You can't really do that with psychedelics. That might be a path towards a bad trip, right? Because you're really trying to hold on and control it. And powerful medicine's not going to really allow you to do that, or it just won't work in the way that it's meant to, right? It's not about you trying to manage and control the experience. It's about surrendering to it and trusting that you're going to get downloaded with some sort of knowledge and information that you might not be able to intellectually explain, but it's there, and it's a feeling that connects the dots and makes things make sense.
Yeah. And yet I still wanted to recognize that the way that you had prepared, you know, how supportive that was. You know, I did want to give you that credit. So it's interesting to navigate, you know, doing it right, but also like making sure that you're as best supported as you can. I think you did a really good job of that, and I'm happy to applaud you for that.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's great. So then we can now get right to the morning of.
Oh yeah, sure.
You know, we made the tea. You had a nice little candle here. The candle was a really beautiful representation too. I liked that touch. So I put the candle on this table that we're sitting at right now. I was just on the floor over here, laying down, and the candle was right beside my drawing. And a beautiful part of this was you were like, okay, I want you to light this candle, and whatever stress that you've written down on your drawing here that you find to be the most prominent in your life right now, just know that when you light the candle, as long as that candle's burning, it's going to hold that stress for you. So if it comes up during your experience, you can just be like, the candle's got this. I don't need to worry about that. And that was awesome. Like, you know, some of the stuff, if I were to like listen to it, some stuff like astrology, and you know, you're like, oh, whatever, like, sure. But in that moment, I was like, this is perfect. Like, I felt anxious in the morning about some work stuff that had happened the day before, and I was trying to, you know, slow down and unwind from that. And I just felt it was very cool because there's just so many things that happen where I was like, how does Adrian know like what to do? But you know, we're not all that complex, like different human beings. We have a lot of the same kind of stressors. So it was awesome to have you in that experience. And then one other thing that was really beautiful, where you were like, is there a memento that you have from your mother that's important? And very, very cool. Just in the summer of this year, my dad was cleaning out the basement back home in Ontario on the other side of the country. And he's like, hey, I have all your like childhood stuff. Do you want me to send it out? And I was like, yeah, totally. And it was all like, you know, report cards from like high school and stuff, which was really fun to go through that. But one really amazing piece was in there was my baby book. And that's just a bunch of pictures from like the first year of my life in this one like cool little book that I hadn't looked at in probably 10 or 15 years. And it immediately triggered, and I was like, oh, it's in the storage room, like right on the other side of this wall. Perfect. So I grabbed the baby book, and sure enough, like open it up, and the first picture is my mom with me as a baby, like right after she had me. And it's got the date there, like December 17th, 1986. It's like the day I was born. And I'm like, oh, this is where I'm trying to go, and it's right here. So we opened up that book, and I just kind of put it against the wall right beside my pillow, so it was very close to the head and the heart for the trip. And that was that was huge. Like those two little things, I was like, I don't know what this morning's gonna look like how we're gonna set this up. I feel a little nervous, and that just made me feel so at ease and comfortable that the candle had my stress, and my mom was there with me, and actually my grandmother was on that page as well, like on the other side. So it was like the women in my life there that brought me here and created me as Brett the human were just there with me, and that was so cool. And I remember just kind of sinking in and just feeling so trusted in the fact that like you recommended those two things. I felt more connected to you as well.
Good.
Which was just the whole thing. I was like, how is all this falling into place?
Oh, amazing.
You know?
Yeah.
It seemed like a bunch of random events, but it was just happening so perfectly, like looking in retrospect. And so yeah, we made the tea. Just boiled down some mushrooms, put a little bit of lemon and ginger in there, which was really nice. I've usually only just like eaten the raw mushrooms.
Right.
And you explained that. What is it with the lemon that helps?
Yeah, so this is as best as kind of, it's a hypothesis so far, but what we know is that mushrooms contain both psilocybin and psilocin.
Right.
The molecules are similar, but psilocin has this extra little phosphorus group on it, and psilocybin has the phosphorus group, and that psilocin does not. And psilocin passes the blood-brain barrier, whereas psilocybin doesn't. So that phosphorus group needs to be removed in order to cross the blood-brain barrier, which your body does normally do through a process of metabolism, but which means that there's sort of a drawn out process as your body's breaking down psilocybin into psilocin so that it can be properly absorbed.
Right.
Which it takes time. And what we can observe is that when we add lemon or any citric acid to the mushroom, like to the tea, before like you make the tea and then just squeeze half a lemon into a cup of tea, that it makes it so that the experience comes on a lot faster. It gets deeper faster, and that it kind of you come out of it a little bit more quickly as well. Yeah. So as best as anyone has been able to understand, we think that the lemon is dephosphorylating that psilocybin molecule, but it has yet to be proven. I think it's probably only a matter of months at this point, maybe years, but I mean, it works.
Yeah, maybe it hasn't been proven, but I can attest that 100% that is everything you just said is accurate. So we drank the tea. I drank the tea. Just I'm saying we is a very collective experience, but just for everyone listening.
Yeah, I find myself doing that.
Yeah, you were not. You were sober. You did not take any medicine. It was just for me taking this experience. I sat on a little floor mattress here that I had set out. Drank the tea, and within about 10 minutes, like it was very quick. We're kind of talking, and you started asking me some really great questions about tell me about your mom a little bit more. And I was just diving into some different experiences and connections that I had with her. And I remember at one point just kind of turning my head, and the whole I saw the trail of the room follow behind, and I was like, okay, I think I need to lay down. And right before I laid down, you asked me one more question. You're like, okay, just before you put your headphones and your eye shades on, why are you doing this? Or you said, why are you here? And I had a pretty good idea of that point from all the work that we had done of why I was doing this. But what I said was very just succinct and short. And I just said, I want to be able to experience love the way that my mom was able to experience love. And that gets me choked up because I didn't, is like everything we had done again, like it all just kind of, right in that moment, it's like all this work that we had been doing and all these little things falling into place. I just knew, I was like, oh, this is why I'm here. And just to feel that and like the knowledge and that last thing to say out loud before going into the experience was extremely beautiful and powerful. And I remember laying down and putting the eye shades on. And what was the music playlist that you had on?
I think the first thing we put on was this album by Les Halls called Zephyr.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I want to listen to it again and, try, be able to go back and and feel some of that stuff that I was
Mm-hmm.
feeling without having to take medicine.
Yeah, it's a great way to do it. Go
Yeah.
back to that music.
Yeah, which is and the little snapshots we'll talk about that in a second too, of the visualization process of remembering certain things that can help bring you back into that experience. So yeah, I remember laying down and immediately just starting to feel this. Like, I think I started crying pretty quickly within
Yeah.
the first 5 minutes. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
just like this overwhelming sense of uh, love and connection, and there was some sadness there too. Like, it was just like, like, there's so many people that I care about and love, but I feel like I have trouble feeling it. And there was a sadness behind that of just like, I just want to be able to feel. And it's been something that's that's been challenging for me probably my whole life. But I think when my mom passed, there was a deeper disconnect there from my like feeling self. And so, you know, there it was. Like, there was the intention that we set just before going in, and my my ex-partner Whitney, we were together the night before, and we were hanging out. And we had this really beautiful evening, and I told her about the drawing, and she just when we left to say goodbye to each other, she knew I was going to do this experience the next day, and she just said, "Okay, like, go to your tree," and that was so awesome to hear her say that, and just know that, like, she was also kind of there, like, she was just like her kind of guiding me there, and pretty quickly, I remember you grabbed my hand, and so you're holding onto my hand. And another weird thing about this whole experience and the way it all fell together is when my mom was passing away, she's in the hospital, and I was on her right side with my right hand holding her right hand. And I remember feeling like, whoa, this is like Adrian is sitting right here holding my hand. It's like this role reversal thing now where I'm like, now I'm kind of going off into a different place as my mom was leaving her body. And that was just like, how did this all come together in this way, in this same position? Very, very strange, right? When all those things come together like that. And this is where it gets very difficult to explain what happened. And I'll try my best to pull out some nuggets of what was going on, and maybe where I was moving through. But the overwhelming sense of feeling and emotion and love and gratitude like I had never felt before with each person that I've known throughout my entire life that I've ever cared about, all at the same time, turned up to 11. And wow, like, I remember saying wow a lot. I remember saying, like, just, oh my God, it's so overwhelming. Like, I was crying, and I was like, it was good. It was a great feeling. It was a feeling I didn't know I could experience. And it was so intense because it's just so much. And even thinking back to it now, it was such a beautiful feeling. I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm ready to go back and experience that anytime soon again.
Sure.
Even though it was beautiful and perfect and amazing.
Oh, yeah.
It was a lot. Yeah. And is there anything, this is where I'd like to hear your perspective of, like, you're watching me from a sober place, and you're kind of watching me drop down into this. What were you seeing through that?
Yeah, I was enraptured. I, like, without knowing the content, just like feeling, just every utterance, every way that your face was moving. I was just gripped by it, because I could really, like, feel that you were really moving through, that things were happening, and it was like, yeah, like I could watch you moving through these emotions without ever, like, without needing to know what they were relating to. And just feeling, holding your hand and feeling the energy coming through it, and just feeling so there with you. And knowing that our nervous systems are communicating on some level, that there's some sort of mirroring, some resonance going on there,
Right.
and just feeling very much in it with you, and not even really wondering what it's all about,
Right.
but just the sheer, like, quality of emotion coming from you I could feel that, and that's like
That's crazy.
stimulating enough that I'm like there with you,
Mhm.
and and really like just so so there.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's an importance too with being in your position as a sitter and a guide of like regulating and controlling your own nervous system. Because I fully believe that if you had been anxious in that state or worried, I would have felt that too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that's got to be a like, what's your process for that? I mean, I kind of just feel like that's who you are as a human being. You're very present, easygoing. I just feel like when you're around you, I just want to hug you. You know, there's a lot of like love there, and
Thanks,
and it
Brett.
just feels really
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
But is there anything that you do to prepare yourself for an experience like this, like the day of?
Yeah, like I make sure that there's that the my my shit's under control, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
that all the loose ends are tied up, that I don't have anything like that I'm really like grappling with
Mm-hmm.
or uneasy about, that I want to be able to like show up and yeah, just be there. I think a lot of it is ultimately just trusting the process that no matter what emotions are coming up for you, that the fact that I trust that we've established a sense of trust that and safety, that
Yeah.
that I know that you're safe, and that me knowing you're safe helps you know that you're safe because you know that you're safe.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think it's
I
it's
got it.
every single time I do a session, it's reinforced, this
Mm.
this knowing that the process can be trusted when the container is held. So trusting the
Mm.
process enables me to hold the container, which
Yeah, I got it.
it's
Yeah, yeah.
it's sort of a self-fulfilling thing as
Right.
long as you show up with
Yeah.
that.
Well, I felt it. I felt that you were there, and I think one of the really mystic, strange things that started to happen is in holding your hand as I was dropping lower and lower and lower, and that's like the only way I can really describe it
Mm.
is it was like kind of just going through these levels, and I've heard people talk about being in a tomb at the bottom of the ocean or at the bottom of
Mm.
a well,
Mm.
and it was very dark, but that's kind of what it felt like, and it was like I was just sinking deeper and deeper, and at the same time losing sense of my body, and is like I could feel your hand, but I couldn't feel my hand
Ah.
at sometimes.
Uh-huh.
Kind of a strange thing, and then sometimes I could feel my hand, and I knew that I was holding something, but I wasn't sure what it was.
Sure.
And then at times I was like, oh, this is Whitney's hand, and then I had this intellectual thought of being like, no, Whitney's at work right now. And I'd be like, but how is she right here?
Yeah.
Or how is my mom right here right now? Like she's gone, but she's here. So
Yeah.
and then trying not to question it,
Yeah.
but feeling the the part of my brain trying to kick in of trying to make sense of things.
Mhm.
And then I remember in those moments I would just my surrender statement was kind of just like, where are we going now? Or like what's next? And I didn't know
Yeah.
who I was asking that question to, but it felt like there was someone there that was guiding me, or maybe it was everyone. It was the medicine.
You were saying it out loud at times.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's cool too, because like I don't know if I was saying out loud or if it was just in my head or where I was.
For sure.
And then I think when I hit like my, let's just call it my maximum depth that I reached, wherever that was, I don't remember being in my body at this point. I think I had completely disconnected from that. And it was like I was standing at the bottom of a well somewhere, and it was pitch black, and but it was perfect. It was amazing. Everything was calm and peaceful, and I didn't know that you could experience calm and peace in that way.
Yeah.
And in that moment, you started humming, and it sounded like at the beginning, it sounded like you were like, "Hello,
Yeah.
hello," and I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, is that Adrian?" And it was really weird because you sounded like a million miles away.
Right.
And I have headphones on and stuff, but you were not close by physically. It was echoey. It was in the distance. I don't know if it was coming through my ears because I didn't have ears at that point. I was out of my body. But I was like, I got a little bit worried, and I was like, oh, is he trying to communicate with me? Like maybe something's wrong. Like I need to find him. And then I realized that you were just humming, and you were like, like just like you were making kind of like nice calming noises, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I think he's just telling me that he's here with me. And I was like, that's great. And then I just slipped back into this feeling of love and appreciation that I wasn't alone in this place that I was. Well, I was still feeling connection to everybody. So I knew that I wasn't alone, but maybe like a little connection to the physical world still. That was a really neat part of the experience. And as I'm kind of dropping down in these lower depths and I've reached this place, I remember just my body was vibrating a lot, and I felt this very strong vibration, and it was coming through like in an audible sense that I could hear my own voice still. And it was shaky, and it was like a pixelated kind of like almost like a digital vibration that I was feeling. And then it just went dead still. And I remember doing this really big exhale, just like everything out of my lungs. And it just went, and I just stopped. And it kind of felt like my heart stopped beating. And I just remember being like, wow, this is it. And there was a knowledge and that I was given at that point that this is what happens when you die. And that's really weird to say because like I don't really know, but I learned in that moment. And it's like nobody could really tell me anything different now. Sure. It's like I know that now. Yeah. And that's weird, and it's weird to say. But it's a feeling, and when you have those feelings that just feel so true, it's how do you I believe it now. So and I think in that moment, looking back when we were, as I kind of came out, and then we had, I drank some normal chamomile tea, I didn't drink any more mushroom tea. But as we're coming out, I'm starting to kind of piece this together, and I was like, I just relived my mom's death from her perspective, and the healing from that is profound. And I realized in those moments of having that conversation with you and kind of lightly talking about the experience while still tripping a little bit, that not knowing where my mom was in those moments back in 2012 when I'm holding her hand in the hospital and I'm watching her go for a couple of hours, and the nurses kept coming in and being like, she's still there. She still has a pulse. Just keep talking to her. But I remember looking at her and squeezing her hand and just like hoping she would squeeze back, and she wasn't. But the nurses are saying she's still alive. So it was this very confusing experience of like, you're still here, but I don't know where you are. Like, where are you? And that's hard, like it's hard to go through that and just wonder, like, are you in pain? Like, are you suffering still? I hope your suffering is over, because those last 3 months of her life were just pure suffering, and that was really challenging for all of us to sit with her through. And it was torture. So it was like hoping that, like, I hope you're okay now. Like, I hope you're not in pain anymore. And then to be able to feel that from her perspective and know that, like, oh, she was traveling into this like really beautiful place where she was leaving her body and everything was perfect, and she could feel the love of everybody that she felt for her whole life turned up to 11. I was like, oh, that's what she was experiencing? Oh man, the healing from that is just like, she was in a really good place, and she knew we were there with her. She was holding my hand, and even though she couldn't squeeze and feel and like communicate back in those moments, that's where she was. And that knowledge of that is something, when I talked earlier about like a life-changing experience, just knowing that now makes everything a lot lighter, man. Just to carrying that for so long and letting it go. And then, we'll talk about this next mystical experience is coming back into my body. And starting to feel around in my stomach. And I remember I took your hand and I was like, feel this right here. And you're just feeling my chest. And you don't know what you're feeling for because you've never touched my chest before. But all around my solar plexus and my diaphragm has been very, very tense for as long as I could remember, to a point where I probably didn't even understand how much tension I was holding. Right. And all of a sudden, it's gone. Like, everything is just melted away. And that was a very, very trippy experience to come back into my body and feel like it was a completely different body. Just from laying down and sitting with this medicine for 2 hours or an hour and a half or however long it was. And my whole physiology was just completely shifted and changed. So now I'm trying to figure that out. Right. I'm just like, how does that work? Right. And like, again, trying to just be like, just trusting in it that maybe we don't need to know. I don't need to really know why that happened, but it's real. And those tension, those little tension balls that at the bottom of my skull that I talked about that I had were completely gone as well. And they're still nothing's reformed there yet. It's been 9 days.
Incredible.
I get some tension headaches back there. And but the really interesting about that one is that it was like someone had really got in there and done some like acupressure massage and it really worked it out because they were sore. They're still a little sore. It's been 9 days and it's like I got a heavy, massage therapy session, but you didn't touch me.
Yeah.
No one touched me.
Yeah. And there's tenderness there still.
A little bit. Yeah. 9 days later. It was really sore for 2-3 days. Like, the same way that if you went to an intense massage therapy session and you come out and you feel good, but like you got to work out. Same thing. But again, no one touched me.
Right.
So like, how, right? It's very strange and I don't understand it, but it happened. And I think the only thing that we can make sense of it is that we store an unbelievable amount of emotional trauma in our bodies, which I've learned about, I've read about, and then you feel it. And it's not that I didn't believe it before. I believed it, but there's believing from the intellectual and then believing from the feeling side. And the feeling is so much more powerful because there's no words. It's just a sensation. So, yeah, man, that was, that's kind of the whole story. And maybe there's some other intellectual connections, dots that were made. Is there anything else from your side there that you remember?
Yeah, I mean, it's led me to think about a whole bunch of things. I remember there was a moment. I usually try to, sort of like try not to put too much on your experience, not a lot of interpretation, not a lot of introducing new ideas. But at one point, I wanted to ask you, do you remember I asked you, if you wanted to tell, if you were able to tell your mom something, what would you say to her?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember what you said?
Do you remember what I said?
Yeah.
Tell me.
Yeah, you said that you just wanted her to know that that you loved her and that you had always felt that love for her. And
right. And then I think I said everything that's cool that's happened in my life is because of her.
Yeah.
These little profound Buddha statements that you get when you're coming out of an experience. Everything is just crystal clear, right? There is a clarity there, and authenticity that's hard to experience when your mind's being pulled in so many different directions with the normal stresses of life. And again, that's such a gift to be able to have those moments of clarity and connect back to them.
It was so potent. It brought tears to my eyes.
Yeah, too, man.
Yeah, and that's about regulating ourselves. Yeah, I was like, it was really powerful to be able to be in that feeling with you. To really feel it coming from you.
Right, and the one other, I almost forgot about this. Well, I didn't forget, but there's so much happens. We're probably leaving out about 90% of the experience in this podcast because it's like a lifetime of experiences that you go through in one of these sessions, right? But another strange one was I've been carrying a lot of guilt and shame around my mom's passing. And I've done a decent amount of work of tracing that back. And from an intellectual standpoint, I can understand why I carry so much guilt, but letting it go is a whole different story. Right? And it's letting go. That's the important part. And it's, through talk therapy and talking to a lot of friends about my mom passing, I'm like, I got a good handle on this, but I didn't let it go. I was storing it in my body. I was holding on to it everywhere. And I remember connecting the dots on this one strange thought process where a couple years before my mom was diagnosed with cancer, she had a bowel reconstruction surgery. And that bowel reconstruction surgery was, what the doctors told us, was caused by her scar from her cesarean section over, 20, 25 years, kind of forming around her bowel and pinching it closed and just growing right around it.
The scar tissue.
The scar tissue had like completely adhesed her bowel. So she was in Shoppers Drug Mart one day and she just like collapsed with intense pain, right? So they had to like rush her in. They took her in for surgery, and they did a bowel reconstruction and also removed a bunch of her lower intestine. And I remember, and it's like I almost forgot about that. Like I remember sitting there and being like, wow, I forgot like she had so many health problems in the last 5 or 7 years of her life before the cancer came. And I'm sitting there connecting dots on like, why is this important? Like, why am I thinking about this right now? How is this connected to guilt and shame that I feel? And it's such a ridiculous thought to have this, but on a very deep subconscious level, if my mother's C-section scar is from having me, right, and I'm the reason for that abdominal trauma, and that abdominal trauma, you know, led to her bowel reconstruction surgery, which, again, intellectual things that I might have been connecting through my subconscious years and creating a story around it. And that abdominal surgery led to like very poor digestive health, and that could have led to her cancer. Then I'm responsible for my mother's death. And I remember just being like, whoa, why would I believe that? Why would I write that story in my head? And just to connect the dots, and in that moment with the clarity and, you know, the sound mind that I had, I was able to just be like, that's crazy. I can let that go. Because, and actually I spoke with Whitney about this the next day, and I told her that, and she was like, but you know, if your mom had the choice of having you versus like not having the bowel reconstruction surgery, you know what she would have chose, right? And I'm like, oh, hands down, she would have chosen like me and my sister, like no questions asked. She's like, right, exactly. So, you know, I remember in the experience too, as it's kind of coming out and coming back into my body and just saying out loud to you, like, what are we holding on to? Why are we doing this to ourselves? What's the point of creating these stories that are so deeply troubling to our subconscious and can leave all this stress in your entire body that can lead to all kinds of other illnesses? And just having that like gratitude for myself to be like, hey, go easy on yourself, man. That's a really crazy thing to try and like weave and create, that you're responsible for this in some way that actually had nothing to do with you. And what is it with our ego that, you know, makes us want to be responsible and involved for these horrible things that happen and torture ourselves over it? So just having some perspective around that has been extremely powerful and life-changing too. To know that my mind's gonna try and create some crazy stories, and I got to keep tabs on, you know, whoever's in there writing these stories, and, you know, maybe proofread them every once in a while and be like, yeah, let's scrap that, let's throw that one in the fire, we don't need that story.
That's good.
So,
that's good.
Yeah.
So now in the wake of it all, how are you staying connected to all of these things that we've been talking about?
The integration part, one thing that you said the day of, I think just before we kind of like ended our session, which was a kind of a whole day event, like you were here with me till about 4 p.m. and, you know, we started at 10 or 11, maybe you're here till like 5. So one of the things you said is, you know, go tell the people that were involved in your experience, and if you've been able to connect to feelings about them, go tell them, you know, tell them how you feel. And don't be afraid to share how you feel. And that's been a big thing for me too, is like, maybe I've felt things for people, but it's saying it to them feels like there's this baggage and conditions behind it. So I'll hold back. Because I don't really want to tell someone how I feel, because then I'm like, oh, then I have to change who I am or be a certain way, or they'll have, you know, an idea around who I am now and overwhelm, shut down, right? Like disconnect the head from the body kind of thing. So I've been having a lot of great conversations this week with people that are very important to me. And I have a huge list of people that I need to go through. You know, it's been an emotionally exhausting experience. So going easy on myself too, to not be like, I'm going to schedule this all out. Like, you know, but that's been a great part of the integration, is just to tell people like, you were there with me, and like, thank you for being a huge part of my life. And I love you and I care about you. And I just want you to know that. And like, full stop, that's it. And like being like, I don't need to like do anything else except just tell people how I feel and like how much I love them.
Yeah.
And that's a cool thing for the first time in my life to know
yeah.
that and feel that, right?
Yeah.
And instead of my brain spinning to be like, what if I say this, then this could happen, then this could happen, then this could happen. And acknowledging that that's still kind of there. Obviously, I'm not like a whole different human being.
Yeah.
It's a perspective and an awareness that's now there that I can feel that, but I don't have to. I can acknowledge it without reacting to it.
Yeah.
And then this other drawing that I'm going to be working on that you recommended, I haven't started it yet.
Yeah.
But it's taking like a little snapshot of the experience, something that I remember that was an important moment to me, and drawing that again, like writing it down, having a visual representation. So why is that important?
I feel
that
like
you recommended that.
I feel like these images, once again, because they sort of can be a bridge between the conscious and subconscious mind, that the ones that emerge through these experiences, they can really contain within them all of that emotional quality, all of the meaning, all of what you were processing in that moment, and that to have a symbol that is loaded, it's so potent with all of this meaning, that it's a direct line again, so that as we go about our life and we get faced with the same challenges, and the ingrained patterns might want to rear their heads again, that having a regular reminder, it's like if you stop taking your vitamins,
Right.
you got to take them every day, right?
Right.
So it's like getting that chance to see that image and be like, right, that image evokes these feelings, these reminders, it reconnects me to that deep knowing, that place that is so inside of myself, that to be able to put it on your wall next to your desk or something like that, and have that reminded every time, that it's not only is it helpful in those moments where you find yourself challenged, but it's like it's prophylactic too, it's running that groove deeper and deeper, so that it becomes integrated into your way of thinking, and therefore your lifestyle, and that the more of a presence that that which you apprehended in that experience, the more of a presence it has going forward, then the more of a chance you have to stay connected to it.
That's beautiful. And maybe we'll leave it at this one thing that I remember you saying to me that kind of wraps that all together. As we were having our conversation on the day of, you said, or I said to you, what a gift to be able to go and experience this and know that I can go back there. And what I was referring to is that, like, when I need to in life, I can take the medicine again, go back and reconnect. And what you said to me was, and wouldn't it be beautiful if you could just connect to that without the medicine? And that's like everything you just talked about with that drawing. Like, I do believe that is like the true power of psychedelics. It's like not to always have to go back, and because it's a heavy experience to go through all that. And, doing many of those is probably gonna be very helpful in your life. But just to be able to be like, no, that's inside of me. I don't need to necessarily like run back to the thing that, because that's an external thing that I'm trying to bring in to be like, I need this thing to help me and fix me. It's a knowledge now that all is in there, and I can connect to it at any time I want. And the prophylactic, right, like you said, creating something that helps you on a daily basis, like taking your vitamins, just connect back to that so that you are living a really good life. So yeah, man, thank you so much. You changed my life.
Oh man,
I'm so glad to have like worked with you and now call you my good friend. And yeah, I just I'm excited to continue this work with you and building this community around everything that's going on here, and helping more people get to a place of love and connection and authenticity. So
absolutely, yeah. Thank you for changing your life. I'm so happy to have been able to help.
Yeah,
and
awesome,
I would like to ask you that.
Okay.
I've never had this is a first, what we're doing right now. So
yeah,
how does it feel to be to be sharing so openly? Getting the story out there. Like,
it feels great.
Yeah.
I was a little little nervous about sharing some of like the intimate details,
Of course.
but I'm a pretty open person. There's going to be some definite strangers that listen to this that I don't know, and that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
I hope that it inspires some people that, are struggling with similar challenges to have an open mind, to find someone that they really trust, go through the process that we did. And if they want to work with you, amazing. If they're in a different place and they can't, maybe they can find someone who is experienced that they do really trust, and go in without fear, and go in with trust and surrender to the experience, and just see what knowledge the plant medicine has for them. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I think it can be so powerful to be, for you personally as well, to be witnessed in all of this. That it's no longer relegated to this, private sort of sphere, but it's, as it opens up into the world, it also, it's more present in all the other regions of your own psyche and your heart and all of that. And I think that's a real embodiment of integration.
Embodiment. I like that. That's a good word. Another good word to remember, right? Just to be like who this experience that I've had and that a lot of people have had, to show up and embody it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Keep taking care of that body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, Adrian.
Oh, Brett, thank you so much. It's a
been
real
awesome.
honor to be here.
All right, man.
All the while.
Yeah. All right. Goodbye, everyone.
See you, folks.
Well, that's it for this week's episode, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate all you guys being here on this educational journey with us all. If you want to continue your education around the art, science, and business of psychedelics, I highly recommend you sign up for our newsletter. Just go over to dailymushroom.co, pop in your email, and every Friday you'll get a newsletter straight to your inbox that keeps you up to date on everything happening in the world of psychedelics. You can also follow us on Instagram at dailymushroom.co and TikTok at dailymushroom.co. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you on the other side.